I was a sculptor. And then I started asking questions about what I was doing in terms of how things work in space and what's going on, as somebody who works in space. And that threw me into geometry as a way to look at formally what goes on in space, what the relationships are, what works, what doesn't work, that I didn't have to worry about the aesthetics or the content. I could just look at it really purely. And so that got me started into looking at geometry from Buckminster Fuller's point of view, and not the geometry we get in school. Although, in some level, it's the same geometry. So that sent me 10 years of exploring geometry. I would model things three-dimensionally, or I would have to draw them two-dimensionally. What I drew two-dimensionally, I would have to make three-dimensionally. And then 5 years into it, I began to write about what I was doing. So I had 3 different perspectives to understand what I understood, or if I understood. After 10 years of exploring, trying to figure out where all these formulas, where all these, theorems, where all this mathematics comes from, I ended up tracing everything back to origin. Where does it come from? Because that's the only way I could understand it. And it all went back to the circle, the compass and straight edge. And at that point, I knew that the circle was just a concept that we drew an image of. It really wasn't a circle, it was just a representation of a circle. So then it was like, okay, how do we get the circle out of, where does it come from? It comes from a sphere. Usually we cut the sphere up, we draw a picture of the great circle, and then we proceed to construct based on what we've learned. And to me, that didn't make any sense, because we're taking the only form that's inherently whole, that demonstrates unity, and we're destroying it. We're cutting it into pieces. And then we just cut the pieces into smaller pieces and continue to construct and play and be involved in building things with these small pieces. And it's a very reductionist way of looking at things. And so I thought, okay, if it's all in the circle, before we cut it up, then all I have to do is to figure out how to reveal that circle within the context of the unity of that wholeness. And so then I started folding, and it just starts generating information. And very quickly I realized that when I impose my will on what I want that circle to do, or what I want to do with it, it wouldn't work. It would jam up. But when I was able to read the information that was being generated fold by fold and use that information to then take it to the next step, there was no jamming up. It just moved along really smoothly. No, there was a continual alignment to the order that it was generating within itself. And as long as I followed that, it worked. If I started to impose my will on that, jam up. Ever since I was a kid, I always drew, I always painted, I played in the dirt, I made things. So what we call art is what I use to explore my environment, to try and understand where I am and what's going on. So I've always used art as a way of exploring and understanding, more than just self-expression. In terms of I think we're all very creative beings. We create moment to moment. We're still here, Creating is just part of the imagination that we're born with. The curiosity, and we build on it. We build our brains on it. Oh yeah, very much. In fact, workshops have been a part of my entire process. When I first realized there was something in the circle to really begin to explore, I was asked to do a week-long sort of class with a year-round school group of kids. They were like 5th graders. And I thought, rather than work with them with art, we're going to fold circles. And I realized, and so it was an extraordinary time, because they really got into it and they were doing a lot of stuff with the folding. Parents were coming in saying, hey, what are you doing with my kids? They're doing these amazing things. And upon that, I realized that there was that it was really educational. It was informational in a very important way. And so I just went, when I got through that school, I went to another school and said, hey, I'm folding circles, you interested? And so I'd work with them a little bit, and then I'd go to another school. So for 27 years of folding, going in and out of schools, different grade levels, working with kids, doing workshops, has been a very important part of my exploration. So, and it's the most fun part, because otherwise I'm working by myself in a studio. So this is a good counter to that, because then I get to get out and work with people and develop, that aspect of the relationships we find in geometry that are pretty straightforward and formalistic and very different than the human relationships. And through that, I was able to see that they're not separate. They're just very different forms. One deals with the physical universe, and the other deals with the mental or spiritual part of the universe. And we've made these separations that really aren't, because the same patterns emerge, at least I see the same pattern emerging in the individual and the interrelationship between individuals as I do in the world around me, as is reflected in the geometry within the circle. Oh, they totally get into it. Most students get excited about it. They fold. They want to know more. Quite often, during all those years of working with students, they're always showing me something that I hadn't seen before. That's part of my education. And so when a group of students come in here in the last few days, we haven't gotten far enough, because we've only had about an hour and a half at the most. So they haven't had enough folding to really get into explore. But they get very excited about it because it's new to everybody. And it's certainly new to them, fold a circle? No, we fold squares. Circles are what we draw. Well, now we're folding circles. So it's an intrigue. It gets them thinking. I think they've done a wonderful job. In this is the first time I've seen this many of my work all in one time. This is only part. I just picked out a whole bunch of stuff to bring, and then we would pick from that. So this is only about a third of what I brought, which is only part of what I have. But it's the first time I've ever been able to see like 350 pieces all together. And the lighting is just amazing. Scott has done a wonderful job with the lighting, and Dave has done. He's allowed me to see my work in a different way. Because when you do something, it usually has an orientation. And even though these have no orientation, there's no up or down, I have an orientation in my mind because of doing them. And so he's taken them, and without any sense of orientation, just pieces that I would put on the table, he puts on the wall. All of a sudden I see it differently. He puts them in different arrangements and puts them together in ways that I would not have thought about. So both of them have shown me in terms of how they put this together, things that I would not normally have seen. So I'm very grateful for having this opportunity, because it allows me another view on the work that I'm doing. No, I don't really have any favorites, but I favor everyone that I look at or make. Because the circle is whole. And everything that we know mathematically, everything we draw two-dimensionally, geometrically, everything three-dimensional, the forms we see in nature, everything seems to be connected to everything else. And the circle is the only form that will give us the whole. It will give us unity. It is unity. It is the compass and the straight edge all in one place. All of these things could be done with a single circle over a period of time. All right, let's look at it this way. Since all of these things are folded from a single circle, if we could somehow get rid of the time and just see them all at once, then we would see a single circle beginning to fill itself out spherically as it enlarges, because they're all from the same circle, the same grid. I fold a circle because it makes more sense than folding squares and triangles and putting parts and pieces together, because it's all in the circle, and if you start with parts and pieces, you will never get to the circle because it's endless. So you start from unity, you have endless stuff to play with. If you start with parts and pieces, you will never achieve unity. Unity is something to be realized, not constructed. When you start with the whole, there is nothing else to be interested in. It's whatever goes on, whatever is generated out from that circle is my interest. And it just gets deeper and deeper, because you can start out folding these shapes and forms, and the more you get into them, the more you start making connections to forms and shapes in the natural world. And then you begin to make relationships to movements, the movement of the circle as it creates these forms, and the movement of forms, out in the world, and the interaction of things. And pretty soon, you get into the form, into the functions, and you get into the molecular aspect of it. You get into the atomic end of it, the theoretical physics. All of that stuff is inherent in the circle, because it's talking about unity, it's talking about the whole. And so there isn't anything that we can't think about, or anything we can imagine, I think can be demonstrated by folding the circle, because it's whole, it's complete, it's unity. There's no scissors, there's no cutting. The circle remains whole. That's the only rule I have with kids, is that you never cut the circle, because then you've fragmented it and you're dealing with pieces. You're not dealing with unity any longer. I do use glue. I use bobby pins to hold them together. I use tape. When I look at nature puts things together and rearranges things for the duration that's necessary to sustain that organism, that piece, whatever that is. And it uses all kinds of mechanisms to hold it together for as long as it needs to be. Well, currently, after 27 years of folding paper plates, I don't need to fold another paper plate, although I will, I'm sure. But I'm in the middle of writing a book now, the 8th book that I've written so far. And it goes into the deeper levels of how this information relates to some of the more conceptual ideas that we're dealing with, how it relates to, and gives some kind of balance to the technology that we're developing. Because all of that technology comes out of a very linear kind of way of thinking that's been going on for centuries. And so we're just taking, and measurement is still crucial. Being able to predict what's going to happen by finer and finer measurements is very important in technology. It allows the kind of sophistication that we've developed in our tools. So we've gone from drawing a circle with a compass and a straight edge to creating a machine who will draw the circles for us and give us the straight edges. And they're all very precise, and they're, very predictable. But life is not predictable. You know, life throws us spontaneous curves all the time. And, you know, we have to understand that technology is not going to solve our human problems. That we need a balance to that. And I think that balance is inherent in unity. It's in the whole.